strong, empowered, authentic.
What's up, Ginger Nation? This is Tosh.
This is Darren, and you are listening to the Authentic
Ginger Podcast. Welcome to the Authentic Ginger Podcast. I'm Tosh Taylor.
And I'm Darren Roach. I'm really excited today, Tosh. I don't know about you, but we're talking about skin today.
It's finally happening.
It's finally happening. So today, Dr. Sandy Skotnicki is the founder of Toronto's Bay Dermatology Center and assistant professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of Toronto. Now, she's also a consultant dermatologist at Toronto's St. Michael's Hospital. And Tosh, check this out. She's a well-known expert, as we know, in skin allergies and has been quoted in Flair, Elle Canada, Chatelaine, The Globe and Mail. Her television and radio appearances include ET Canada, CTV, City TV, Global News, CBC Radio, and The National, and CBC National News. Holy smokes. Welcome to the show, Sandy. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
We are totally pumped up today because what we want to talk to you about today is freckles, and this is a redhead podcast. We're all about the redhead culture, and we have redheads on this show on a regular basis. We also have non-redheads on this show, and so one of the things that has come up in our podcast throughout the last several months, we talk about freckles. We've had conversations about a person having the same freckle on the same spot in their skin, and redheads have this kind of weird, freckly thing that happens. We're all freckle. I mean, I'm not a redhead, but certainly my family is. Yeah, I'm not a redhead, but every single one of my kids are redheads, and so it's pretty bizarre and strange. But tell us first of all what you do, what your main objective in your business is, and then we can kind of get into some freckles.
Sure. I mean, I've been a practicing dermatologist for 25 years. It's going on 26 actually. And I'm a generalist, like I see everything, but my academic interest is actually allergy, contact dermatitis. I wrote a book on that about 4 years ago. And, but as a general dermatologist, you see everything. And one of the most common things we see is people coming in for skin checks because they have spots, right? They're worried about their spots. We categorize skin shades or tones by a Fitzpatrick scale. It's just after a doctor who described it. So redheads typically are Fitzpatrick 1 and 2, which means they're very fair. They don't have the ability to tan. They can only burn. That's Fitzpatrick 1. That's the definition of a Fitzpatrick 1 skin. So they cannot tan no matter what they do. And it should never be your goal, but
right.
if that is, they can't. So then Fitzpatrick 2 is somebody who's fair but can tan, and then it goes onward. Type 5 is someone with African American type skin tone. And so the part of the reason patients of Fitzpatrick 1 and 2 and red hair often have red hair is they have a different kind of melanin. So melanin is what gives our skin pigment and your hair. And it's what we lose, the melanocytes, that's the cell that makes the melanin. So to get old, that's where we go gray, right? Yeah. And patients of red hair, they cannot produce a darker tone because they have a different kind of melanin. They have eumelanin, so it's just a different form. So even their moles are sort of reddish brown, like they can't do a dark brown. So and melanin is our protector from UV exposure. And actually, it's interesting. Most people don't know this, but if you get a tan, it's an SPF of about 3. So it's your body's way of trying to actually protect itself from sun damage. That's what a tan is. That's why a tan's not necessarily your goal. It's like your body saying, hey, we're trying to protect ourselves, your DNA in the skin from the UV damage.
Are you saying that our bodies have about a 3 SPF already built in that protects us a little tiny bit? When
you get a tan, that's like if you have a tan after you've been out in the sun, or you get some color, that is equivalent to about an SPF of 3. So it's your body actually trying to protect itself.
That's interesting. So that, that saying, I need to get a base tan before I go south. It has some base. It's still not good, but it has some basis to it in a way, right?
Yeah. Well, it's protecting you from burning because you've got a bit of an SPF of 3 or 4. A t-shirt actually only gives you an SPF of about 5. The darker the color, the higher the protection factor. the tighter the weave. And there are now protection clothing. It's actually started in Australia, clothing that has UV filters, sunscreen filters in the fibers, or the clothing is treated with UV filters. So they call that UPF clothing.
Yep.
And those are great because you don't need sunscreen if you're wearing one of them.
Something that you mentioned that I found really interesting in your intro, moles. So Tosh, can you confirm with me that your moles would be the color of red and so on and so forth? I thought that was really interesting.
I actually don't have moles, but my mom, who obviously carries the ginger gene, she's not a ginger, but my mom had a very bright red mole on the side of her face. And that's the only mole I've ever known her to have. But it was red, like lipstick red. So I didn't realize that would obviously be the reason why. Yeah.
You bring up another interesting point. A lot of redheads, especially the Fitzpatrick ones, like the very fair, they can't produce moles. They don't have enough pigment to produce moles. So they're often not very moly, but incredibly freckled as they get on in life if they haven't protected themselves as much. They're actually the easiest to examine because they got nothing. They got a lot of freckles. They got no moles. So It's pretty quick, right? And actually it's easy to see something changing on them because the freckles are all fairly uniform. And if you see something different, it's going to be pretty obvious. When people are very moly, it's more of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible for non-redheads to be as freckly as redheads?
Yeah, I mean, it's really so let's talk a little bit about the semantics of, freckle. A freckle is technically not a medical term. Okay, we have all these crazy Latin medical terms for all this stuff. So the definition of a freckle is something that comes and goes. So in the beginning of the summer, you get some freckle or some brown spots on your nose, and by the end of the summer, or when it's not sunny, they kind of go away. So they're not permanent. So if you have a brown spot that is permanent, that's technically called a lentigo or lentiginous for plural. So lentigos are permanent brown spots from the sun, and there's actually no cells. It's just pigment. It's just increased melanin pigment. So if we go back to that, what I was talking about, your body sort of laying down melanin to protect itself, that's your tan, right? Over many years of your life, some of that pigment starts to accumulate. And so people will come in their 40s and 50s and they're like, oh, these brown spots. I wasn't in the sun this year. I go, it's 50 years of sun accumulation. So as your skin is accumulating this damage over your lifetime, you hit a threshold or a tipping point, and then they start to become visible. So so freckles are really a lay term. It's not the same. If you've got brown spots that do not go away, they're technically called a lentigo.
I'm gonna ask you right off the hop, because I was always told that freckles were a glitch in DNA. That obviously is not a thing.
A glitch in DNA.
I know, and I'm looking at myself going, no, I'm sure it was not from a doctor. No.
Right. No, I mean, that's why. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that. So that's obviously debunked. That's not what that is.
No, I mean, that's basically everything I started at the beginning, is that your body as a Fitzpatrick 1 redhead doesn't have the ability to protect itself as much. So your spots, your freckles, lentigos, whatever you want to call them, they're going to come earlier because your sun exposure is going to be that much more advanced, if you will, because you don't have that natural protection. So the freckles and lentigos, whatever you want to call them, they're a function of how much sun you've accumulated over your lifetime. So that's why you see them on the face, the chest, the back, and the top of the hands. You don't see them on the buttock or, the back of the legs, and depending, unless you use tanning beds or suntan nude.
Right. That's right.
You see them where the sun shines.
As you age and as you've accumulated the sun damage, I guess if that's what we're calling it, your freckles can become more pronounced as you get older. And
yes,
does that mean that they, even in the wintertime or when you're not, out exposed to the sun, as you've built up that these freckles, if we'll call them, does that mean that they will take longer to dissipate, or will they continually just keep staying until, you're 80 years old and you're like, what are all these brown spots on my body and why aren't they leaving?
Yeah, no, they accumulate.
They
They
accumulate.
accumulate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you'll find often it's a tipping point. Like you kind of like you have a few and then all of a sudden, wow, I have a lot. And it's as you get older and as you age. And it's really a function of how much sun exposure you accumulate over your life. And we do call it photo damage. I mean, it is damage to your skin from UV light
Right.
accumulated. And the other way I explain it too is we're all our body is made up of individual cells, like trillions, right? So as that individual cell, if you think about it as a circle, ages, the damage that's contained in that cell comes forward. So that's why you get a sunburn when you're 18, but you don't get skin cancer till you're 60. That damaged cell is sort of maintaining itself, and then as it ages, like as we age, the damage comes forward. So it's the same with the pigment. It just starts to accumulate and come forward. And one of the risk factors for developing melanoma skin cancer, which is the deadly form of skin cancer, is how many freckles, lentigos you have. So there's 5 risk factors: fair hair, fair eyes, presence of freckles, spots, whatever you want to call them, the number of moles, 50 to 100, history of skin cancer, and in the family or personal history of skin cancer. So, they are an individual risk factor for the development of skin cancer.
My dad, who is highly freckled, he has had skin cancer removed a couple of times. Now, how do you tell the difference? Because as you said, if we're the Fitzpatrick 1-2, we tend to have just more spots than we do moles. How do you tell the difference between like knowing it's skin cancer if it's just a freckle, or will a mole actually appear in the freckles?
That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
If we could somehow have a system that triages people, because there's so few dermatologists in Canada, and that's people come in all the time because they just don't know. There is no easy answer. I had a just to digress. I had a friend who's a famous artist, and I asked her once, "How do you know a painting is good?" And she switched it up on me, and she said, "How do you know a mole is good?" It's not something you can teach somebody in 10 minutes. It's a lifetime of doing art and understanding frame and composition and color, this and that. So it's the same with a mole. And some of it becomes even sixth sense as you get on. In my age, you just look at something and go, it doesn't really follow the rules, but there's something about it. So in general terms, the type of skin cancer that a Fitzpatrick 1 and 2 would get, which is the gingers, is more commonly the non-melanoma skin cancers, which are they're the less dangerous. That's probably what your father had. Mm-hmm. They're called basal cell carcinomas and squamous cell carcinomas. So they're more common just because they are associated quite highly with sun exposure. Whereas melanoma isn't always. You can get a melanoma on the bottom of your foot, like where you have no sun exposure, or very little. Mm-hmm. So sun seems to be more of a causation with the non-melanoma skin cancers, basal cell, squamous cell. So how do you see those? It's pretty obvious. They're kind of a red bump that scabs. So my rule of thumb when people are asking, if you have something that isn't healing, which should be fairly intuitive, or it scabs and heals and scabs and heals, and it's fairly new. Sometimes people have basal cells for several years before they kind of start scabbing, and they're not life-threatening. They just need to be cut out. It's a nuisance, and it can be a cosmetic problem if it's on the face. Mm-hmm. Squamous cells, similar, scabbing, not healing, bump, right? Melanoma, much more tricky because, what's a freckle? What's a mole? Then you get age spots too. They're called keratoses. There's lots of brown spots. And it's very challenging for patients to know. And I have this conversation, I had it probably 10 times yesterday. And, there's so few dermatologists. I say, listen, if you have something and it's brown and it's irregular and it's new and you're not sure, you got to see your family doctor to triage you. Family doctors are very good at triaging. That's their main goal. Like, how bad is this? Do I need to refer? Because as dermatologists, we can't see everybody.
Right.
Irregular shape, size, and color is sort of what you tell people, but you can have an age spot that satisfies those criteria. And as you get older, you get some of those, and then you can't really tell the difference. And it's not a 5-minute explanation. It's a 20 years of doing dermatology.
Like every summer, like you said, I get more and more freckly. And I find that a lot of my freckles start to grow together. So, and then that's obviously going to look irregular too, right?
Yeah. So sunspots can be irregular. Probably one of the most common things people come and say, I have this spot on my face and it was brown for years and now it's kind of getting weird looking. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's a sunspot. It's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have friends that come to you and say, Sandy, what is this? Or look at, can you have a look at this? Like, you must have that. You must get that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
I've got a good story. I've got a good story there. My mentor who trained me, Dr. Melanie Pratt in Ottawa, she tells this great story. And I tell people, especially in a party situation, because I'm drinking, it's dark, and I'm actually doing a patient a disservice if I comment. So I just tell them the story. So I have a colleague, somebody came up to her at a party and said, is the spot okay? And she looked at it, she said, I think it's fine, but you should really come in for a skin check. Because, it's like looking at one spot and she came in for a skin check and she had a melanoma on her back. So, what bothers you, it's actually a very common scenario to have patients come in and they're so worried about this, and then we find something else.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I say, like, if it's a pimple or something, like, or it's a whatever, like, or they ask me about their hair, some cosmetic cream, it's more common. But for moles, I say no. As a doctor, everybody becomes your friend. I'm your friend. Yeah. They call in and go, I met her at a party. She's my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Can I get in faster?
You squeeze me in? Yeah, can you squeeze me in?
Let's talk about removing freckles. Is that a thing? Like, I know that there are a lot of people that despise their freckles. I adore my freckles. I can't wait for the summer for them. I mean, you're freaking me out a little bit today that maybe I should. And I don't spend an awful lot of time in the sun. I don't. But in the spring, when the sun starts to get warm, I will, just to bring my freckles back into their darkness, because mine turn green in the off season, if you will. And I look sick. Yeah, they go like a really pukey kind of color. Yeah.
Well, so the first thing I wanted to mention there, just listening to you, Chad, is that you still get UV exposure through sunscreen. That's why they're called screens, right?
Yeah.
We should put a screen in, like a solid piece of something in front of you. You're still getting accumulated sun exposure through sunscreens. Mm-hmm. It's filtering out the more damaging rays. It's decreasing the accumulation of rays that you get for when you're out. But you will still have your freckles come out with wearing a sunscreen. So don't forego that just so you can get your freckles back. That's just for the general audience.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
So how can you remove them? Oh, we have many different ways. Well, the first thing I should say is the definitive treatment, we talk about it in medicine as gold standard. The gold standard for this, the gold standard for that is something called an IPL, or intense pulse light, akin to a laser. It's actually technically a light therapy, not a laser. So IPL and lasers target the melanin pigment in the skin, and they kind of heat it up selectively and sort of blow it up, and then it comes off and sheds off the skin. So that is the gold standard for getting rid of brown spots, lentigos, freckles. If you want to then maintain that clear skin, you've got to wear your sunscreen, right? Mm-hmm. And then there are some topical active cosmeceutical ingredients that we call them because they have some active, they're not just a moisturizer, they may do something in the skin. And that's the retinol, retin-A, glycolic acid, and vitamin C, are the main ones that have some decent science to help that they will decrease. They won't remove brown spots. They'll fade them a bit, and it takes months to years. It's better to sort of have a procedure done, and then you can use those things to sort of maintain. And some people will come in like yourself and say, I don't want all my freckles gone. I just want less. Okay. So we do less. We do less energy, less treatments, whatever. We might just, and same with guys. Like some guys have a heavy beard and they don't want no beard. We just thin it out. It's a different kind of laser. So you don't have to have removal. You can have just decrease.
That's unbelievable. And do you see that often? People come in and say, like, I want these. What do they give you reasons why, or do you ask why?
Because you're at the stage where you're having just a few freckles and you like them, but as you get older, you might get the bigger blotchy ones. That's what you said about coalescing. And people come up and say, some like grandkids. This is hilarious. So people come in and say, I don't really want to look any different. I just want some of my grandkids keep asking me if I have dirt on my face, right? Like that's a reason to maybe want to decrease them. Yeah, I think it's obviously a cosmetic issue, and to each his own in that respect. Like some people don't like their freckles, some people want less freckles, some people's freckles start to coalesce and look splotchy, and they don't like that.
I know that people are actually getting them tattooed across the base here. Like this is kind of like everybody loves this look, but then if they spread into your forehead or onto your cheeks, then it's not as cosmetically pleasing, I suppose. So
yeah, it depends on the person. Yeah, I think there's makeup too. You can splotch on some freckles.
Excellent.
It's amazing.
Can we talk about sunscreen then? And I mean, we all know the importance of sunscreen, but do you find a difference for redheaded people, Fitzpatrick 1 and 2s? Like I assume my daughters, I both, they're in SPF 60 all the time. Is that the best? Is there a certain kind of sunscreen that's better for people like us?
Well, maybe we should just digress again and talk a little bit about, there's been a lot of sunscreen controversy over the past few years in particular. There are two main classes of sunscreens, chemical filters and physical filters. So chemicals, think of them as a sponge. So you put them on the skin, they absorb into the skin, they act like a sponge, and they sort of sop up or soak up ultraviolet rays. Physical blocks, which would be titanium and zinc, those are the only two. They sit on the surface of the skin and they reflect. There is some absorption actually, but they mostly reflect. And so those are not problematic. They actually are safe and for the environment as well. There's some issue with nanotechnology with some of that, with the physical blocks, but generally those are in the safe category. And the FDA also said, and Health Branch Canada said, no problem with those. So in the US, I think there's 14 chemical filters, and it's a very strange thing that the FDA did. They came out and they said, we're not taking these off the market, but we need more research. We need more studies to be done by sunscreen companies, because they did this one study with 24 people. That's a small study. They put sunscreens on themselves 4 times a day. They did not go outside. They did not swim. They didn't sweat. There's no wind. And then they checked their blood levels for the presence of chemical filters. And of course, they were absorbed. That's what our skin is there for. It absorbs things and it digests them and metabolizes them. Some go to the liver. I mean, our skin is a permeable barrier. Of course, things are going to be absorbed. Just because something's absorbed doesn't mean it's bad. So they said, okay, the levels are higher than they should be in the blood. Well, so first of all, 24 people, not a study that replicates how people use sunscreen. So that's the basis of part of the problems where this is coming from. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, wanting more studies, but they've kind of incited a bit of panic in the population where they don't want to use them. The other issue with sunscreens is the environment, and in particular the coral. So I went to a really amazing talk in Boston in April. It was a review of sunscreen toxicity. And the main issue there is the benzophenone group, right? Which has been banned in some islands, right. Hawaii and Costa Rica and other places. So the fellow that spoke was a scientist, and he said, listen, the sunscreens can harm the coral, but the concentrations in the oceans are so minuscule that it's not really possible. Now, this was his conclusion. He looked at all these graphs and studies, and I think the problem in medicine is it's never black and white. There's always lots of gray. So it's climate change, it's the heating of the oceans. Can we make sunscreen safer? What? Yes, and should we maybe not use this particular one? Maybe yes, but there's this panic when people take a headline. After all of that, for people of Fitzpatrick 1 and 2, because they have a higher risk of getting skin cancer based simply on their skin tone, you want to go 50 plus. So we kind of talk about sunscreens now 50 plus. And that really started in Europe, because after 50, it's not that it doesn't make any difference, is that you have to understand that sunscreen SPF is determined by a test, and the test is very rigid. And so when you determine the SPF with a sunscreen, you put it on a back 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, and then you shine a solar simulator on, and you get a number.
Mm-hmm.
But the SPF is only telling you the UVB protection, not the UVA protection. So that's where the test falls short. And so if you are a sunscreen manufacturer, you want to add in more UVA filters,
Right.
okay, which also can block some UVB. So you have 2 UVB filters, then you add 3 UVA filters, and all of a sudden your SPF test gets way high because you've got all these extra filters. But that wasn't your goal. Okay, your goal was to add UVA filters, which happen to also block some UVB. So you get this high number, but the number is not really indicative of the protection, because it's not telling you the UVA protection, and it's falsely elevated because you've added UVA filters, which, by the way, are more important because UVA is the thing that causes skin cancer. UVB is more about aging and sunburning. So on that point, you want a 50 plus. Okay, because it doesn't matter if it's 60, 70, 80, because that's why they put the plus there, because the SPF is not a great thing. So 50 plus UVA, UVB protection, broad spectrum, which most sunscreens are. And if you are concerned about the issues with sunscreen, and that's a personal preference, then you stick with a physical block of titanium and zinc. The only issue with those is that you've got to reapply them a little bit more frequently because they can melt. Sometimes they're cosmetically less acceptable to people, although the technology now has improved so much that they don't look pasty or white, and sometimes they're tinted.
Yeah, this is pretty neat, and you just nailed down zinc, and what was the other? Zinc and
titanium.
Titanium. Okay, and that is usually found in like mineral screen, right? Like it would say definition. On the okay. So is it just some companies being very smart and clever by saying that they have a block versus other companies that say they are a screen?
No, so that goes back again to the technology. So a sunscreen are the chemical, because they're acting like a sponge, right? A block is something that you're just sort of putting on the surface of your skin. It's reflecting light, so that's kind of the zinc and the titanium. Again, it's not the scientific terminology. We call them chemical filters and physical filters. But the lay term would be block for zinc and titanium, and the chemical one's a screen, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
They're all sunscreens by definition, because they're not, like I said, blocking out. But I don't love that terminology. I think it's a marketing terminology. But
that's what I was wondering. Yeah, and then one of the things I sit and I think about this whenever I hear a conversation about melanoma or skin damage or aging and all this kind of thing. One thing that I can't understand has happened over my lifetime, and I'm not sure if either of you have gone through this as well, but we always focus. I mean, me, and I've been brought up this way. We focus on our face, and we put less focus on our arms and our legs. Why do we do that? Why do we just go to the face?
I think because if you burn your face, it's pretty uncomfortable. More than maybe other parts of your body. I don't necessarily know that I could. I'm not a sociologist to determine the behavior, but I think it's a common thing. It just. And then you kind of slap some on other places. Yeah. But to answer your question about where melanoma is most common on the back in men and the back of the legs in women. And I think that's partly because those places are missed, maybe. And also they get the brood of the sun exposure, men not wearing a top and women wearing shorts or skirts. I don't know if that's changed. I haven't looked at the statistics in a while, but that's always been sort of the thing that you're taught in dermatology by locations.
Right.
Yeah. And it is, of course, very common on the face too. Sorry. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I guess for me in my back, as a chubby guy, I have never really taken my shirt off outside in the sun. So I'm hoping I'm going to be okay, because I just don't even do it. Because if I do, I'll burn, and I know that. And when I do burn, despite the fact that I'm a chubby guy, it hurts. Like a back burn kills. I mean, I might have had it once, and once was enough for me.
I just wanted to touch on something you had meant about sunburn. So there is a statistic: one blistering sunburn, so blistering, you actually get blisters, increases your risk of melanoma by 50%.
Whoa! At any time in your life, if you've had just one, and I definitely have. I'm an '80s baby.
The other thing is sun tanning beds. So sun tanning beds. I just had a girl last week, 26, with a melanoma. She had used
Jeez.
tanning beds for, most of her formative years. And they're
Wow.
now in many provinces and states banned under the age of 18. And the World Health Organization has labeled them as cancer-causing or carcinogenic.
Sure.
So that's a big, big risk factor and a big no-no, especially for gingers.
Yeah.
Get a fake tan. Go get a spray before you go somewhere if that's really what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, speaking of that, is there a way, if I wanted to keep my freckles dark, even on my face, if I just wanted to keep my face freckles dark all year round, despite sticking my face out in the sun, is there a way to do that properly? Like I know that they've got those, what do they call them? I can't think of the name of them. Is it a mood light? Is that what you said? Or blue light, whatever.
Yeah.
Did they do anything? I know that they're good for vitamin D, but okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think the UV would. I don't know what's in a blue light. It's an LED, right?
I assume so. Yeah.
I think there is possibly some melanin activation there, but it'd be minor.
Super minor.
Yeah. If you have you ever used a self tanner?
No, I haven't actually, just because the rest of my skin doesn't tan.
Right. Well, you can use. I don't know if they have them for the face, but there's these glow moisturizers where you just get a little bit of darkening. And if you have something that's already dark, it'll also darken more.
It'll darken. Yeah.
You can also get more color on your normal skin. So the answer to that is not really.
Okay.
Other than going out in some sun. But, we use UV light as a therapy sometimes for things like psoriasis or eczema. And when people aren't in the area where they can go to a hospital or a clinic that has a UV treatment, we'll say, go out into the sun between 11 and 3 for 5 minutes without sunscreen, and that's a treatment. So you don't actually need a lot of sun exposure to darken. So if you want to keep your freckles, if that's something important to you, I guess you could go out even if it's winter.
Brave the Canadian winter for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yeah. And you'll probably get enough sun exposure to keep your freckles the way they were in the summer.
Okay. Excellent. That is something, like, that's my favorite thing about my freckles, is how much difference my face is between summer and winter. To me, it's night and day. It's like two different people.
Are you the type of person that will practice everything that you preach? So as a dermatologist, are you going out putting sunscreen on everywhere, or how does that go?
Okay, so on the sunscreen front, I'm quite militant, but the rest of it, like I'm not a product junkie. I'm probably the opposite. That's what a lot of my book is about. But no, I put on a sunscreen every morning on my face, because just even riding in the car, there's a great picture, if you get the opportunity after to look it up. Just type in on Google truck driver face sun exposure, and this fellow's one side of his face is completely wrinkled and the other side is probably typical for his age because he drove a truck his whole life. So just even driving to work, you accumulate UV exposure through your windows. If you go out for lunch or whatever, so just the face part is because it really gets the brunt of the sun exposure. And if you do it in the morning, it's kind of done. Technically, chemical filters last for 8 hours, but they tell you to reapply every 2 hours because people often under apply.
Yep.
Not often, pretty much more than 50% of people under apply. And I'll come back to why that's important. And then, and you miss spots, and then you sweat and whatever else. So reapplying every 2 hours is sort of to try to cover those bases. But to go back to that silly SPF test again, the SPF is determined by a certain amount, 2 milligrams per centimeter squared, and then they do this test, right? So the SPF is dependent on that quantity. So if you, it's a typical shot glass of sunscreen to do a whole body, but that's a lot of sunscreen.
Wow.
And if you have an SPF of 50, a product that's SPF 50, and you put half the amount of sunscreen that you're supposed to, you actually get an SPF of 25. It's directly related to the proportion. So that's often another reason why I just tell people go higher, because you're probably going to underuse it and you're going to get an SPF of 30 anyway. If you do it 30 and you underuse it, you're getting 15. So that's not enough. And that's something we don't take the time necessarily to explain to the patient in a 5-minute, 10-minute visit. But we just intuitively know that the higher is better because the public under applies the quantity of sunscreen.
Right. When we apply sunscreen to our kids and we're at the beach and they decide they want to hop in the water within 5 minutes after getting their sunscreen on, how much of that salt water, if we're talking an ocean, how much of that salt water is going to wash that protection that we just put on them? And is it even redundant to do so if they're going in the water anyway?
Mm-hmm. So a couple tips there. It's much easier to apply your sunscreen before the kids get dressed.
Right.
Before you even go out.
Good point.
So there's a sort of adage of putting sunscreen on 30 minutes before you go, so there's some absorption. That's a bit false, because if you there's some, these TikToks and things and people putting on a sunscreen and then you have that black filter kind of thing that shows you sunscreens work immediately.
Okay.
But we want it to sort of, we don't want to be rushing and slathering and have, if you ever put on sunscreen like this and then you got burn marks or tan marks where you miss spots. Yeah. So if you're not rushed, and listen, I have 3 sons and they're older now, but I could be running around. Like, I'm a dermatologist and they wouldn't even put sunscreen on. So you just better to, they're at the beach all excited. I don't want to do this. So you do it before they even leave. And for kids, I really a big proponent of UPF clothing. So you get them in one of those long t-shirt things and get them to pick them and pick the cool colors that they want and whatever. And bucket hat if they will let you, even with a silly strap if they're young enough so it doesn't come off.
Yep.
And then you have to just worry about their legs and maybe their face, right? And you're not chasing them. So try to do it before. Now, to get to your question, if you didn't have time and you got there, as a general rule, we always say as dermatologists, any sunscreen is better than none. Whether it's washed off, whether it's long enough, whatever, it's better than nothing. Something will stick and something will help. But to get into that habit of doing it before they leave is
the best way. Yeah, that's good, because I mean we're guilty of that here at our household. We do apply it usually at the car before they hit the water. But then I always sit and I'm always the one thinking that's just going to get washed off in about 5 minutes, and you're going to burn anyway. You know what I mean? So they come back out of the water, then let's reapply, and then it's like and of course the kids certainly we have all girls, so all the kids' hair is really long, so you're trying to lather this stuff on, and it just becomes a pain, right? And then you're like,
it is a pain, and that's again why if you try to do one good application before they leave, and that's a prerequisite to go to the beach. You want to go to the beach, you got to do this now.
Right.
Get them some fun shirts so that you don't have to worry about reapplying it and the chemicals and the environment and the ocean and all the rest of it. And then again, bucket hats are in for girls, so you can get them some cool bucket hats, and you got to sort of make it. I used to also have baskets of sunscreen by the door, so my kids would sort of grab them before they left. The sticks are really good. Sticks are good because they can just be reapplied without, it's a really quick thing, and they're heavier, they stay.
Right.
And
they also stay white in your face, don't they?
No, the sticks are really good now. There's lots of great sticks. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Now, the other question I had for you, Sandy, was, I don't know if we touched on it, but when it comes to men and beards, so I will sunscreen here and here, but when I get into here, I kind of just stays on the surface. Does my hair do any protection to my face underneath it?
Well, there's a reason why bald men have lots of sunspots and skin cancers, and men with hair don't. So hair is a natural protectant, of course. But sprays can be helpful. Gels. I like sports gels. A lot of men that are hairy will use a sport gel. Yeah. So gel, think about a hair gel consistency that would rub in very easily to your beard area.
Yeah, okay.
And so they're great for hairy areas. Or the sprays. Sprays are, you don't love sprays as dermatologists, but hey, again, any sunscreen you're going to use is better than none. So you can spray that on the hairy area. You could spray it on your hands and sort of pat your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you are getting some natural protection with your beard for sure, but yeah.
Tasha, are you a spray? I feel like you might be.
I am.
I knew it.
Not on my own skin. Isn't that fertile? Isn't that bad? I'm like, I find it easy for the kids, but I am a huge advocate for the long sleeve rash guards. Both of my girls' bathing suits are long sleeve rash guards. And both of them, like you said, bucket hats for girls are cool right now, and they're right into them as well. So I am lucking out in those, but I find it easier because they can put their own sunscreen on better with the spray than they can with the lotion. However, as they get older, they're 10 and 7. I'm kind of hopeful that I can slide them out of that. When they were younger, that too. Yeah, when they were younger, it was cream, and then when they started wanting to do it themselves, I got the spray, and now I'm hoping to push them back out of that. So we'll see how it goes. I know that we're running out of time with you, Doctor. So I wanted to ask you, one thing that people have said to me my whole life is, you're so lucky you're a redhead, you're never going to age. So we know that redheads' hair goes white instead of silver. So, it takes longer for our hair color to change. But I have been told that your skin looks better as you age as a redhead. I don't know if that's true because, we have the sun damage with our freckles. So
this isn't coming from
no, definitely probably just old people and Zellers back in the day commenting on my hair,
Well, it's interesting about your hair. That makes sense because the gray would be the sort of slow loss of the dark pigment that makes it sort of that grayish color. So gray is sort of a mix of white and dark, right? So that's why you don't go gray, you go just white. But if you look at it from a purely scientific point of view, no. I mean, Fitzpatrick 1 and type 1 and 2 people have less natural protection from UV light. The biggest aging thing out there is ultraviolet light.
Right.
After that, smoking, and then maybe our diet and sleep and all these things we never used to think about. But no, it's the opposite.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's fine. I do a whole lot of skin routines to make sure my skin keeps up. But I had thought the same thing. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Actually, the only thing I might mention there, I was just trying to think of folklore and
it's probably what it came from,
history. Well, no, because I mean, if you know where the term redneck comes from, like the Irish workers came over and they worked, made the railroads, they built a lot of the streets, and their neck was red. So people of fair color knew that they were very susceptible to burning, so they stayed out of the sun. So those people had this peachy, beautiful skin as they got older because they stayed out of the sun.
Got it.
So it probably comes from that more than any kind of innate natural protection. It was a cultural thing because they knew they would burn.
Yeah.
And there was no sunscreen back. There's no sunscreen back then.
That's right. So and now we're sun worshippers. So
yeah,
it's
it does make sense, but it's an antiquated time, and it's not what's happening now.
Okay. Both of my theories today debunked.
Good. Yeah. It doesn't happen often, Doctor. So this has been wonderful for me listening to that.
And I, you know what? I'm sure that I'm not the only redhead that's been told that, right? So it's nice to
100%.
Have other gingers to hear these things as well, because we need to know that taking care of our skin is the most important thing. So
right.
Yeah.
And does that mean, Sandy, that would you have ever put out a product knowing what you know in your career?
Oh, I've been asked that many, many times.
I bet.
Not anymore. I mean,
No.
What I enjoy, because my interest is ingredients and allergy, I help companies with their formulas for their products. I think that's more rewarding for me. And to be honest with you, I don't have the time or energy. It's a very crowded market, and I don't think we need anything new. We actually probably need less and more simplified things. So not at this time. Unless if somebody came to me and said, "Hair, we want you to make something and we'll do everything you just do," I'd probably say yes.
Yeah. Here's all the money we'll pay you, and we'll give you all of the stuff to do it and take over all your other duties. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. In a perfect world. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, this has been super fun. We don't want to take up any more of your time. I know it's a busy time of year, and as we get heading back into school, and all that kind of stuff. But this has been a joy. And you mentioned your book. Can I get you perhaps to give us the name of the book one more time, just in case people want to go and look at that up?
Sure. So my book is called Beyond Soap, and it's available in most libraries across Canada, and it's been translated to Russian and Vietnamese and Czech.
Amazing.
Kind of cool.
That's great.
And it's really about as a society how we have an increase in sensitive skin and reactions to personal care products, and an increase in eczema, and sort of trying to understand why that is. And it's really got to do with a lot of how we have been told to wash ourselves and clean ourselves, and that'll make us beautiful. The skin health has very little to do with beauty. Beauty's an industry, commodity, whatever you want to call it, and skin health is very different. So the two have sort of clashed, and it's a great breed, especially if you have reactions to products, or you have eczema, or you just want to understand what it is you're putting on your skin.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll look that up for sure, and we'll make sure to put a link to it in the show notes as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun, and thank you for having me. It's an interesting take on talking about ginger skin. There is certainly some unique and special qualities about it.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And again, we look forward to seeing what else is up there for you as things move along. And we'll keep you updated on anything. We won't flood your inbox, we promise. But we'll definitely, if we have any questions, we know where to go.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
You've been listening to the Authentic Ginger Podcast.
Become a part of the Ginger Nation by liking, subscribing, following, and leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast was produced by Tosh Taylor of the Podcast Hub Productions. Find her online at podcasthub.ca.